The wildest part isn't that I caught the HOA president living in my dead grandma's mountain cabin. It's that she opened my front door in a fluffy bathrobe sipping Starbucks and had the nerve to call me the trespasser like I'd wandered into her spa a day by mistake. I swear if entitlement had a zip code, it would have been stitched into that robe. So there I am, tires crunching over fresh snow on this narrow private road, the kind that looks innocent, until you realize there's one lane, one cliff, and exactly one way back down. I park, step out, breathe in that sharp pine and diesel air, and I'm already feeling that weird mix of grief and relief you get when you revisit a place that used to feel like safety. Then the door swings open and out comes Brenda Hutchcraft, HOA president, self-appointed sheriff of the mountains, holding a latte like it's a badge. She stares at me like I'm the one who broke into her house. "You're trespassing," she snaps, phone already up, already recording, because of course she's recording. "Get out or I call the sheriff." And behind her, I see it. Men's boots by the fireplace, big muddy, definitely not mine. Designer luggage in the living room like she's checking into a resort. Makeup scattered across my grandma Ethel's old vanity, the same vanity where Ethel used to keep little tins of buttons and those weird peppermint candies that could crack a tooth. It hits me in the chest. This woman has been living in my inheritance like she won it in a raffle while sending me HOA bills every month with late fees and threats. The audacity wasn't just breathtaking, it was athletic. She blocks the doorway, arms folded, smirking like she's doing me a favor by letting me stand on my own porch, and I'm standing there thinking, "Jake, don't swing, don't swing, don't swing." Because the last thing I need is to get baited into becoming the villain in whatever little story she's already writing for the neighborhood. But Brenda made one fatal mistake. She picked the one property up here that sits at the end of a one-lane mountain road, and I controlled that exit. Let me back up, because this whole thing didn't start with the bathrobe. It started 3 months earlier when my grandmother Ethel passed and left me her A-frame cabin in the Pine Ridge Mountains, 3 Acres Creek, access the kind of place real estate people describe as a dream while charging you for the privilege of breathing. Grandma built most of it herself back in the day, tough as a $2 steak, raised 5 kids alone, survived the Depression, the kind of woman who could fix a leaky roof and your attitude in the same afternoon. I'd just gotten out of a divorce that took half my electrical contracting business and most of my patience with humanity. And my plan was simple: fix the cabin up, use it as a weekend retreat, maybe rent it out a little for extra cash, just breathe again. Quiet, pine trees, creek water, no lawyers. Then the HOA introduced itself. Pine Ridge Community Association covers about 40 properties scattered across the mountain. Most of the residents are decent retirees, folks who just want to feed deer and complain about the weather like it's a sport. Dues were reasonable, $150 a month for plowing and road maintenance, fine, whatever. And then there was Brenda Hutchcraft. If you've ever met someone who treats rules like a love language, you know her. She's 45, real estate license, 8 years of unchecked HOA power, married to Derrick County Planning Department, so yeah, a power couple made in bureaucratic heaven. Brenda turned HOA violations into performance art. Mrs. Patterson got slapped with a $500 fine because her mailbox was hunter green instead of regulation forest green, like Brenda carried paint chips the way other people carry gum. The Johnsons got dinged $750 for parking their brand new 80 grand Winnebago in their own driveway for 3 days. Brenda claimed it attracted transients as if a shiny RV was basically a rolling meth lab. Her masterpiece, though, was showing up at the Kowalski's house with a ruler to measure their grass while Mr. Kowalski was recovering from heart surgery, still on oxygen. I'm not exaggerating. She stood there in expensive perfume and righteous fury, measuring lawn blades like she was conducting an autopsy. So when Grandma's obituary hit the paper and the cabin switched into my name, Brenda locked onto me like a heat-seeking missile. First letter inheritance transfer fees, $400, a made-up charge that didn't exist in the covenants. Then deferred maintenance notices on a cabin that had been maintained better than most people's marriages. Every letter arrived certified mail, that thick thunk against my door like a legal grenade. I was drowning in divorce paperwork, juggling jobs, trying to keep my business from sliding off a cliff, and I did what a lot of people do with HOA drama. I shrugged and figured, fine, I'll pay the nonsense, survive her tantrum, move on. That was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 was ignoring the weird questions neighbors started asking. "Heard you're having money problems," one guy said, awkward smile. Brenda mentioned your inheritance might be tied up in court. Maybe tax issues. Tax issues. I had everything clean, probate cleared, property taxes, current deed recorded. But Brenda was spreading rumors like she had a commission on my stress. Then I got this monster packet, 14 pages of legal gobbledygook about an emergency caretaker assessment. Translation, she wanted to charge me $350 a month for someone to monitor my cabin because apparently it was abandoned and at risk. Included was a line about significant structural issues discovered during preliminary inspection. Nobody had permission to inspect anything. I'd been there 2 weeks earlier, winterized pipes, shutters, secured pantry, spotless, not even a mouse turd to complain about. That's when I decided I wasn't doing paperwork tennis anymore. I was driving up there unannounced to check my own place. And that's how I ended up staring at Brenda in her bathrobe in my doorway, telling me she'd call the sheriff. The next 48 hours, she went nuclear. I'm sitting at my kitchen table on Tuesday, coffee in hand, and this certified mail package lands like a brick-fancy Denver law firm, letterhead Harrison Blackwell and Associates, the kind of stationery that screams, "We bill by the breath." It claims I'm harassing HOA personnel and creating a hostile environment and demands I give 72 hours written notice before I access my own cabin or face $1,000 a day fines. Then same day I get an emergency septic inspection notice courtesy of Derek's County Connections, 30 days to hire licensed contractors for a septic system repair requiring permits that take 6 months, estimated cost 15 grand. Here's the thing Derek didn't count on me knowing. Older cabins up here built before 1970 often don't even have septic tanks. They use composting toilets and gray water systems, perfectly legal if they're set up right. Grandma's system had been working fine since Kennedy was president. Derek had created a bureaucratic nightmare for infrastructure that didn't exist. So I drive back up to document everything, and suddenly my cabin is a fortress, motion sensors, security cameras, the works. My boots hit the driveway and sirens start wailing like I triggered a prison break, echoing across the valley, probably scaring deer into therapy. Brenda comes out with her phone recording voice loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You're violating the restraining order," she announces like she's reading a movie script. Restraining order I'd never been served, but that didn't stop neighbors from coming out when the alarms blared. Brenda put on a show, trembling voice, crocodile tears, the victim routine so polished it should have had a SAG card. "He's been stalking me for weeks," she told Mrs. Lucy down the road like I had nothing better to do than haunt her mailbox inspections. "Ever since I discovered his family owes thousands and there are tax issues." And while she's doing community theater, I'm standing off to the side scrolling through property records because Grandma Ethel was obsessive about paperwork. Fireproof cabinets, documents back to Eisenhower, everything labeled in that neat old handwriting. That's when I see it, the 1962 easement agreement. I'd seen the paper before, but never really read it. Grandma negotiated perpetual easement rights with exclusive maintenance authority when she bought the lot. And if you've never dealt with mountain property law, here's the short version. When a private road crosses other properties, access is usually shared. But sometimes if you're stubborn and smart, like my grandma, you secure the right to maintain and temporarily restrict that road for safety and repairs. Meaning, I didn't just inherit a cabin. I inherited control of the only way in and out. That realization hit me like a lightning strike, and I did the hardest thing I've ever done with a bully. I didn't react. I apologized to the neighbors for the noise, acted confused, acted reasonable, let Brenda think her intimidation was working, then drove away like a defeated man. Inside, though, something had shifted. Because now I wasn't just fighting an HOA Karen, I was holding a lever she didn't know existed. The next few weeks were pure psychological warfare. Brenda slapped a lien notice on my cabin, $8,600 in accumulated fees, backdated violations, snow removal charges for a driveway. Nobody used a tree trimming fee for work that never happened. And my favorite, $3,500 for unauthorized occupancy monitoring services during the months she was living in my cabin. She literally billed me for the privilege of stealing my home. Then a process server showed up at my job site right in front of my crew, handing me foreclosure papers like a lunchtime special. My supervisor, Martinez, gave me that careful, neutral look contractors give you when they're deciding whether you're about to become a liability. That weekend, I turned into a forensic accountant. My lawyer subpoenaed HOA records, and I spent hours digging through bank statements, invoices, vendor lists. And the deeper I went, the more my coffee started tasting like battery acid. Phantom landscaping bills, snow removal charges that made it look like we were plowing with gold shovels. Every inflated invoice tied back to someone connected to Brenda, brother-in-law, cousin, friend of a friend. The total missing funds weren't pocket change. It was real money, retiree money, fixed income money. And then I found out why she was so desperate for my cabin. Her own mortgage was behind. The real estate market had kicked her in the teeth, and she'd been using my grandma's cabin as her private little life preserver, even renting it out on weekends like an illegal mountain B&B. That discovery was infuriating. But what broke me was the estate sale receipts. Brenda had sold my grandmother's belongings, antique furniture that survived the Depression, hand-sewn quilts, even framed family photos, my grandpa in his Army uniform, my grandma's nursing school graduation, 60 years of history, sold to strangers for $1,800. I'm not proud of it, but I sat in my truck afterward and just stared at the steering wheel. Jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth would crack, thinking, how does someone do that and still sleep at night? Then the restraining order arrived, delivered by a sheriff's deputy who looked embarrassed just holding it. It barred me from approaching Brenda or the property at my own address, my own cabin, my own inheritance. At the hearing, Brenda tried to play it confident, tried to wear her innocence like jewelry, and then the judge asked for her current address. She said my cabin's address like it was the most normal thing in the world. The judge blinked, looked at her, looked at my attorney, looked back at her, and you could almost see the moment the whole thing clicked in his head. My attorney slid the deed across the bench, clean title, proper inheritance, airtight. The judge's gavel came down like thunder. Restraining order dismissed, he said, and then with the calm tone of a man who's seen too much nonsense, Miss Hutchcraft, you will vacate the property immediately. Brenda leaned close as we walked out, perfume and panic mixing in the air. This isn't over, she whispered, voice low, ugly. You have no idea what I'm capable of. And that's when I realized the twist in this story wasn't going to be a clever legal argument. It was going to be what a cornered person does when the mask comes off. She called an emergency HOA meeting, sent out flyers about removing a dangerous individual who threatens community safety, meaning me. She made a PowerPoint because, of course, she made slides accusing me of planning to turn my cabin into a drug den for Denver criminals. She brought fake witnesses, her sister and neighbor, claiming I'd threatened violence. Then she proposed a special assessment, $25,000 per property, to hire private security against me. For a moment, it felt like I'd entered the upside-down version of reality where the criminal becomes the victim and the victim becomes the threat. But here's the unexpected part. The room didn't buy it. Colonel Patterson, retired Marine, stood up slow, like a man who's about to end a bar fight with one sentence, and said, "Where exactly did our reserve fund go, Brenda? Because these bank statements look like someone's been draining us dry." That meeting didn't end with me on trial. It ended with Brenda on fire. Neighbors demanded audits. People who'd been quiet for years suddenly found their voices. Brenda's performance turned into an interrogation, and watching her try to squirm out of it was like watching a raccoon explain why it's holding your wallet. Meanwhile, I'd set trail cameras around my property, legal on my land, and those cameras caught everything. Brenda greeting different guests every weekend, taking cash, handing out keys to my cabin, smiling like a resort hostess. And then one night, 2 a.m., infrared footage caught her sneaking behind the cabin with a metal lockbox, digging near the old fire pit, burying something under pine needles and rocks. The next morning, I hiked up with a metal detector, hands shaking not from cold, from rage. I found the box. Inside, $12,000 in cash and the official HOA checkbook. She had literally buried the evidence in my backyard. That was the moment I stopped seeing her as just a petty tyrant and started seeing her as a criminal planning to disappear. I caught audio, too, her pacing outside, talking to someone named Rick about selling the property to a cash buyer from California, forging documents, making it look like he was buying from the estate. That's not HOA drama, that's real fraud. Then the second twist hit. Derek called me, voice trembling, and confessed he'd helped with fake inspections, paperwork, the septic nonsense. Because Brenda threatened to destroy him in divorce, take his pension, ruin him. He said she was packing to flee before dawn. And the third twist, the one that made my stomach drop, he said she'd threatened to burn down the cabin if the investigation didn't go away. So I opened Grandma's filing cabinet again, more careful this time, and found a locked metal box bolted under her workbench, key tape beneath a drawer because Grandma Ethel was petty in the most practical way. Inside was the full easement agreement, and a clause I hadn't noticed before. A termination provision tied to criminal activity or fraud by anyone using the access road. Meaning, if Brenda was committing crimes while using that road to access my property, I had the power to revoke her access permanently. And that's when I realized what my grandma had actually left me. She didn't just leave me a cabin, she left me leverage and a quiet lesson about how you survive people who think rules only apply to everyone else. So I did something that was both completely legitimate and deeply satisfying. I scheduled an emergency culvert replacement under the private road because the old drainage pipe was actually failing and spring melt would have been a mess anyway. I hired a real excavation crew, pulled real permits, sent certified notice to every property. It was real work, real equipment, real concrete sections delivered from Denver. And it required blocking the road at the last point where it meets the county highway. One way out, and I controlled it. By the time Brenda realized what was happening, the crossing was a gaping trench. Heavy machinery was roaring, barriers were up, and the first snowstorm of the season rolled in like the mountains themselves were joining the plan. She tried to file an injunction claiming false imprisonment, and the judge basically said, "Ma'am, you can't claim residency protections at a house you're squatting in." Then she called me suddenly sweet, suddenly reasonable. "I can pay you $50,000, she said, voice syrupy cash. "Just call off construction, let me stay until spring." $50,000 in cash from a woman who'd been stealing from retirees and burying money in the dirt. Sure, Brenda, sure. I recorded it, every word. And Monday morning, right on schedule, federal agents showed up at my construction site. Black SUVs, serious faces, coffee steaming in the cold. Neighbors gathered behind the barriers like it was a parade none of us wanted to miss. Mrs. Lucy, the Kowalskis, Colonel Patterson standing there with that quiet grin like Christmas came early. The agents hiked up the trail through snow, and 20 minutes later we heard it. Brenda screaming across the valley, rage echoing off the mountains. When they came back down, she was in cuffs, designer boots, slipping on ice, still trying to perform for whoever would listen. "This is a conspiracy," she shouted. "I protected this community." A reporter asked her how she responded to embezzlement and fraud charges, and Brenda, bless her delusional heart, said the line that basically gift-wrapped the case. "Those aren't crimes when you're protecting property values," she said loud on camera. "If people were too stupid to understand my vision, that's their problem." The agents didn't even look angry. One of them actually smiled like, "Thank you for confessing out loud, ma'am. We love efficiency." And just like that, the mountain got quiet again. A few months later, she pled guilty to a pile of felonies: embezzlement, insurance fraud, mail fraud, obstruction, restitution, prison. Derek took a lighter sentence for cooperating, but his county career was done. The HOA reformed, brought in oversight, audits, transparency, the kind of boring adult stuff that suddenly becomes sacred when you've lived through chaos. As for me, I walked back into my grandma's cabin with my own keys. The smell of pine and cold wood hitting me like a memory, and for the first time in months I exhaled like my lungs belonged to me again. I rebuilt what mattered, recovered what I could, and I kept one of Grandma's quilts folded over the back of her favorite chair by the fireplace, because that's the part people like Brenda never understand. You can steal things, you can bully paper, you can forge signatures, but you can't actually buy what a home asterisk means asterisk to someone. And here's the lesson that landed late for me. The one I wish I'd learned before: the certified letters and courtrooms and sirens' power doesn't always look like a weapon. Sometimes it looks like a clipboard. And the most dangerous people aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who know how to make the system do their dirty work while smiling like they're just following procedures. The only defense is paying attention early. Reading the fine print, asking the uncomfortable questions, refusing to just keep the peace, when peace is really just you being quietly robbed. Because karma is real. It just likes paperwork. Now, I've got to ask you something. When someone abuses power like that, using laws and rules as a cudgel, where's the line between getting justice and getting revenge? And does that line even matter when the system finally turns on the person who's been twisting it? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me if you think what I did was fair, too far, or exactly what she deserved. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a landlord, a boss, anybody who pulled the "I make the rules" routine, I want to hear your story, what happened and how it ended.